has talked several times at Agile Yorkshire over the years. Past winner of Lightning Talks, Christmas Lightning Talks. Please give him a super warm welcome.
Right. Hello. Thank you, Picasso. Right. Okay, everyone. Thanks for coming down tonight. I'm going to provide an update on a talk I gave about Devops, unsurprisingly, at Agile Yorkshire on the 11th of February 2014. So it's been a while. Sorry, I've been busy. But I thought I'd come back and give a bit of an update. So there were some first-timers here tonight, because this was my first Agile Yorkshire, which is ambitious to speak at a meet-up on your first attempt, but that was my first one. So we got some first-timers tonight. Who's a first-timer tonight? Whoa, quite a few. Okay, who has been coming to Agile Yorkshire when it's been in this building? Okay, a few of you. And who has been to Agile Yorkshire when it used to be like in the Round Foundry and other places? Oh, we got some long-termers. Was anybody at this? Other than Roy? Not that he was a member.
That was before we videoed them as well. So
it was.
Yeah.
There's little evidence, but there is some. Okay, so you've been running this since 2009.
17, on and off.
17 years.
Don't say that.
Why don't you have horrible. An MBE? I don't know. We'll start a campaign tonight, a crowdfunder or so. Can you buy MBEs? I don't know how it works, but we should do something like that. Probably yes. Maybe. I
would say almost certainly that's the way you get them. Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say that on camera, but anyway, there we go. But good news tonight. This talk, at least the first bit of it's good, because Roy did a review of it. And you can read it on the Wayback Machine, and he said it was all right.
Wow.
So that's nice. That's what Agile Yorkshire website used to look like.
Seb Rose as well, yeah. Still writing books. Seb Rose is writing a book, yeah.
All the stars, even back then. Okay. So this slide deck was recovered from a laptop which I found in a cupboard, which I'd forgotten about. And as you can see, it's 12 years old. Easy to judge that by. But you can kind of tell that as well because it's like 4:3 ratio. It's not widescreen, so it's always a gamble when you turn up at a meetup whether you were going to get a swanky widescreen projector or whether you were going to get like an old one, which was 4:3. So you never knew whether you were going to have like your slides stretched or squashed. So this is 4:3, but as you can see, we've got widescreen now. Isn't it good? It's easy. Fortunately, it's not the only thing that's gone widescreen since 2012. That's me talking at the event. That is what 12 years of Devops does to someone. This is the result of that. Look at that lovely hair. It takes me ages to dye it grey like this. It really does. So, yeah, and Roy, what happened to the Twitter screens, the scrolling Twitter feeds on the projector?
It was too hard to get going, yeah. It was, I used to like, I'm using your time up now.
Yeah, it was rhetorical, so carry on.
So we used to, go on, we'll talk about it at the end.
If anybody's interested in why Roy doesn't have Twitter feeds, we'll be in the pub later.
Well, people's wives used to tweet.
Again, it's rhetorical, so we'll move on. Anyway, so yeah, let's keep going, or we'll be here all night because I've got best part of 100 slides to get through. So yeah, I'm going to give a recap of that talk, an introduction to Devops, because in the last 12 years there's some stuff happened, and I should probably give an update on that. So let's get into this. So that was me then. I don't use Twitter anymore. I don't work there. These are my views and not the views of my previous employer or my current employer or even my future employer. These are things I've learnt from running meetups, conferences, speaking to people, and just reading stuff as well. So these are learnings from my experiences of being involved in Devops the last 12 years. And beyond. And Leeds Devops, as Roy says, is no more. But Yorkshire Devops is alive and well, and it's happening tomorrow. If you want to go, and you like Devops after this, search meetup.com. It's on there. The organiser isn't as good as me because he didn't send me the slide he promised to promote the event. I don't know why, but anyway, he could have had that. Right, so in the talk, I try and do something ridiculous, which is actually define what Devops is. But Devops was kind of set up to be kind of definitionless. It was more setting the scene and a problem, and then it was over to the community to try and work out the answer as well as the question. Okay, there was no Devops manifesto. There was no real definition. It was kind of, this is the problem. Go on then, work it out. And I'll explain to you what's happened since then. One of the early kind of like patterns for solving this was something called CAMS. This was by John Willis and Damon Edwards. That was around 2010, I think that came out. And then I'm going to talk about something star dev, star ops, star, which is basically all the noise and confusion which has happened in the last 12 years. So this is my first public speaking engagement giving this talk. So I think, okay, I'm going to go a little bit controversial. Not too controversial. I'm going to make a statement. So what I thought I'd do is I'd use some fruity language on slide number 3. Okay, so apologies if you're offended by the Rudy words, but I have masked them out and I'm not going to say them out loud, so they're going to be there and implied. Okay, so there's a guy called John E. Vincent, used to be called Lucis on Twitter, one of the early proponents of DevOps, one of the thought leaders, and he had a definition on DevOps. So I read it out. Here we go. Hold on tight, folks. DevOps means giving us stuff about your job enough not to pass the buck. DevOps means giving us stuff about your job to want to learn all of the parts and not just your little world. Developers need to understand infrastructure, operations people need to understand code, and people need to flipping work with each other and not just occupy space next to each other. Okay, the swear words have gone down a lot better than they did 12 years ago. Okay, so basically, he's saying we all need to work together. And this follows some thinking which was around from kind of 2006. Somebody coined the phrase, you build it, you run it. That someone was someone called Werner Vogels, who was the CTO of Amazon at the time. And in this article, I've got the slide deck at the end, so you can do the QR code and you can find the links if you're interested in diving a bit deeper into this. But in the article, he's quoted as saying, the traditional model is that you take your software to the wall that separates development operations and you throw it over and then you forget about it. Not at Amazon. No. You need to build it, you run it. This brings developers into contact with day-to-day operation of their software, and the article goes on to explain pretty much what Lucis was saying in his rather sweary rant, okay? So this is a known thing. Okay, so what does this look like in pictorial format? Because I'm a visual thinker, and this is a slide that has followed me. I still have a variation of this slide today. So let's just discuss what it is, and then I'll bring it a bit up to date. So on the left-hand side, we have Disaster Girl, who's representing the developers. They can build software. They throw it over the wall. You can see where the wall is because it's got the word wall there, okay? And then on the other side, we've got a rubbish meme that I didn't understand at the time, but it's something to do with a dinosaur and a lizard and a monitoring system called Nagios, which nobody uses anymore. Well, I hope you don't use it anymore. There's plenty of other alternatives. Let's build it a little bit up to date. Let's swap the meme for that one. I think that works better because this indicates that the ops team on this side of the wall are in the burning building, okay? We understand that, we've got that. Okay, let's enhance it further by removing the word wall and putting a picture of a wall, just in case you're confused. And we can see from this word handoff, that's people throwing the software release over the wall. And this word feedback is the ensuing conversation from the chaos that happens, okay? So to ignore the humorous intent of the memes for a minute, what we've actually got here is quite a big problem. We've got our developers who are creating releases. They are throwing it over the wall to an unsuspecting ops team that are already busy, that didn't know it was coming because the wall is stopping any communication between the two. And they're expected to drop everything, deploy it to production, and the conversation that happens is not very constructive, I think you could say, between the two. So that's what we're trying to show by this. So let's move into how we got to this point and why we started talking about it, by talking about DevOps and how it happened. So I don't know if anyone was at the Toronto Agile conference in 2008. No, funny that, yeah, neither was I. But there's a guy from Belgium, a consultant called Patrick Dubois, who's largely credited with being one of the godfathers of DevOps. He's an IT consultant, he's working on data center migration. He is frustrated by the infrastructure team's ways of working because they ain't very agile, because they are not very flexible, they are quite waterfall in their approach. And he's got some ideas about how to improve that. And he gives a talk, and you can download the slides still, about Agile infrastructure. At the same conference, there's a guy called Andrew Clay Schaefer, who's also credited as being one of the creators of Devops. And he suggests an open space kind of talk, a bit of a feather session on Agile systems administration. Patrick goes to it. Andrew decided it wasn't very popular and didn't go himself. And Patrick's the only person there. So Patrick hunts down Andrew. He didn't hunt him down. He went and found him. Sorry, it's not like a stalker. He just went and found Andrew and had a conversation with him about his ideas, conversation, and a Google group's formed and some other people get involved. So we got a Google group on Agile systems administration. Then, in 2009, velocity. 10 deploys a day at Flickr. 10 deploys a day? Wow. Okay. At the time, and at the conference, this was seen as radical, almost reckless. They got a lot of stick. So this is Paul Hammond and John Allspar, who gave this talk. And meanwhile, Patrick's watching the feed, and he's like, this is brilliant. This is like Agile systems administration. This is the stuff we should be talking about. And laments that there's no conference near his house. I mean, he went to Toronto in 2008. Let's not feel too sorry. But anyway, he's lamenting this point. So somebody in the Google group says, well, why don't you run a conference on it then? And he went, that's a very good idea. So in Ghent, in 2009, Patrick, there he is, ran a conference about ops and dev and called it DevOps Days, okay? And that's where we get the phrase DevOps from. So a lot of people from the Agile system admin group attended, and some other people, lots of good conversation, and we'll have a little look at it later, what happened at that event. But this is the first one in the States, in Mountain View 2010. If you search that on YouTube, you can find Patrick talking about DevOps in 2010 at Mountain View. And there have been hundreds of DevOps Days events, community-driven, since then. And then we got to 2010, and Gartner caught up with this grassroots movement, with seeing the effect that talking about DevOps and some of the wins that were coming out of it, and decided to talk about it. And then all hell broke loose because the vendors got involved and the money people, hence the noise and confusion. Okay, so that's why we have DevOps. That is kind of recognizing we've got this problem with this wall and we've got a movement that wants to do something about it. Like I say, still definitionless at this point. We don't really know what it is. We're trying to work it out. But I think it's safe to say that although this is involving people who aren't doing their job effectively and not working very well together, and it's a technology problem, it's actually a business problem, isn't it? Because if you're a business that makes stuff, you have a marketing and finance and an operations division. Operations not to be confused with the ops in DevOps. And if you are, say, for example, making garden furniture, it's the operations bit that make things, okay? We're not making things in this example, we are running software. So the thing we make is software. So the devs make software, it goes to ops, it provides a service for customers, customers consume that service, pay us money for it, we pay bills and salaries, and then requirements, bug fixes, etc. come round and round and round and round we go. So if there is a blocker in that bit there, that's a business problem. If that's not optimized, that's a problem. What can we do about this? Well, before I explain it, I'm going to imagine that most of you here tonight, being at an Agile meetup, are probably familiar with Agile software development and probably not so much with what ops teams do, okay? And you might be wondering, okay, I get the development team are creating releases and doing features. I get that, I understand that. What is it this ops team actually do? Because I don't really involve myself with ops or infrastructure people. Well, ops teams have non-functional requirements, which is a stupid name. Because although they've got the word non-functional in them, they're not non-requirements. So this is things like security, backups, deployment, availability, capacity planning, all the stuff to do with the kit and the infrastructure they're running, whether it's physical or it's in the cloud. They have audit and compliance people to deal with. They have service management people to do it. And let's not forget security. Most of the security burden will fall into this infrastructure that's been run. And in 2014, at the time I was writing this, there's still some, should we say, legacy work attitudes within ops teams that like to be in charge. So I see some nodding at the back. Were you one of those people? Anyway, let's not get into that. Okay, so we got that's what an operations team do. Okay, so you're wondering, suddenly a software release comes along and they're trying to keep all the stuff running. That's the problem. Let's just say that. So we got this business problem that this ops team, this dev team aren't working very well together. We're the space age, aren't we? We're pioneers, we're tech. No one could have had these problems before. What can we learn from history about this stuff? Because, it's tech and it's cutting edge and nobody's had these problems. Well, it turns out that the operations divisions within organizations have already been dealing with similar sort of problems for many years. There's a skill called operations management, and that's related to how you run that operations division. So whether it's you've been running mills for years, or you've been making lawnmowers, or you're making software, some of these concepts for optimizing, removing blockers, so optimizing systems with systems thinking, theory of constraints, so removing where we got blockers, and adopting ideas from something like Toyota Production System are incredibly applicable to what we're doing in tech, even though we're probably a little bit too arrogant to recognize that. And of course, Toyota Production System, history of it obviously comes from Toyota, based on a lot of work done post-Second World War in Japan, namely Edward Deming, who was like one of the pioneers of the Toyota Production System with statistical models and ways of working, and then with Toyota, or Toyota as the company's known, for implementing that and making it actually work, producing high quality vehicles and being very efficient in the production of those. You might know Toyota Production System as Lean, which is kind of the rebadged American version from the late 80s, early 90s. So within Lean, it talks about the fundamentals of the Toyota Production System relating to removing non-value waste, optimizing for flow, improving quality, automating all the things, making sure we can't put things together the wrong way, and then improvement methodologies like 5S's and problem-solving techniques like 5Ys. Okay, so all of these theories we can adopt into our ways of working in software. What I'm not saying is we should be building software like we make lawnmowers or cars. That's not what I'm saying. But we can take some influences from the ways of optimizing the way those things are built into the ways we work. Okay. So let's look at one of the ways we can adopt that. Something called CAMS. This is one of the early DevOps patterns, if you like. So this is from 2011. So John Willis and David Edwards came up with this concept of CAMS. It's an acronym, Culture, Automation, Measurement and Sharing. You might have heard of something called CALMS, which is Culture, Automation, Lean Metrics and Sharing. I'm going CAMS. And for me, out of the four of those, the culture is the most important bit, okay? Because if you haven't got the culture right, then automation, measurement and sharing just doesn't matter. It's just not going to work unless you've got people prepared to adopt these ways. So let's go through each one of them in turn. Culture. Okay, so this is basically solving the problems from the loosest, sweary definition. Getting people to work together, exchanging ideas, valuing what each other do, understanding what each other do, creating empathy, creating shared responsibility, and basically getting over that whole cultural problem we've got of working together. That's kind of that. Okay, so let's find a way to basically take that terrible, sweary definition away. And I made a terrible choice at my first Agile Yorkshire because I thought I would illustrate a good company culture through the lyrics of the Bob the Builder theme song. I'm not doing that. I genuinely did that and read it out. Not tonight, though. Okay, moving on swiftly. Yeah, you're thinking about it now, and you think, actually, that works, doesn't it? It didn't. Okay. Right, automation. So we've got our developers writing code, goes in the version control system. How do we get that from the version control system in front of users? Because until it's running in production, it's absolutely worthless, no matter how much effort you put into it or paid for it. Well, in our world of software delivery, we're talking pipelines, aren't we? So we'll have continuous integration, which will build a release of the software. We will then test that release of the software with automated tests. We will then automatically deploy it to a test environment where we may run some integration tests. And then, depending upon the organization and what quality gates we want in place, That may get promoted through environments like UAT, into acceptance testing, and eventually in front of the customer. Okay, what we've got here is we've almost got a production line that makes lawnmowers, but we're not making lawnmowers, we're making software. So we can adopt some of this lean thinking with continuously improving what we're doing, looking to improve the quality. Remember that what separates Toyota and the lean thinking is they have production lines that are built to improve flow of products into production, so effectively making cars efficiently, but also maintaining quality and making them high quality. So if there's a problem in that production line with a car, the production line will stop and that will be swarmed on to solve the problem. This is stopping the build. This is breaking the build when the test fails, and as we've got them throughout that pipeline. So we can adopt those ways of working. Measurement. Oh, we've got metrics, haven't we? So traditionally in infrastructure and cloud, we've got lots of metrics about the stuff that our stuff runs on. So we've got lots of metrics about CPUs and disk usage and memory, but we can also do that for the software that runs. So we can measure the amount of CPU and resource it's using as well. But we can also measure things like throughput, transactions per second, number of events it's processing. So we can start surfacing those metrics. And then we can also pull that back to our pipelines. We've got our pipelines running, we can record metrics about that. And of course, metrics are great and useful, but only if you look at them. So let's start putting them on dashboards and start sharing them. Now, of course, if we're starting sharing metrics around, let's not have them weaponized. Let's have a culture that encourages psychological safety. Let's make sure that the metrics we're sharing are actually used for the right thing so that they can be used as indicators for improvement. And then maybe other teams will look at those metrics and adopt some of those ways of working, which we're doing, into the ways they work. But equally, we can look at the way other teams are working and adopt some of their workings in practice and look at the way they're optimizing stuff, the way they're delivering stuff. And of course, we've got mentoring schemes and skills exchange and all the kind of like traditional kind of, I suppose, offline skills exchange programs. But let's not forget things like inner source programs, being able to have visibility of each other's source code repositories and the benefits that brings. Okay, so that's CAMS. I wanted to just include a slide on tools, because tools are one of those gateway drugs, aren't they? We love a tool, don't we? Oh, we love them. These are from 2014, so there's only a couple of these still around. So we've got Git, GitHub, Splunk, if you can afford it, Jira, who knew it'd still be around, and beer, which I will be drinking in the brewery tap if you want to come for a pint afterwards and discuss this stuff. But the point here is, like, tools are like a bit of a gateway drug for techies, aren't they? So let's install a new thing and it will solve things. And there was a really good talk around 2016, which is one of my favorite talks by Bridget Cromout, which is Docker will not fix your broken company culture, which is just like, yeah, let's Docker all the things. What difference does it make to your actual organization? Installing tools is the same. At the minute, we've got developer portals. Developer portals are great, but only if people use them and they actually add value to the business. So be wary of tools. You can create follies and ivory towers out of them very easily that nobody will use and add no value. Okay, I'm going to come back to this because this is about DevOps job titles, DevOps teams, DevOps tools, and it got very confusing around 2014, and I'll come back to that. That is definitely the noise and confusion in this talk. And then I decided I'd wrap up. Shameless plug for the meetup, because it was new. And then some promises about providing some resources, which I never did. You didn't come and chase me, so sorry. Just in time delivery. And then some links and stuff, and Twitter. And I had a Google group as well, which I don't think had anybody in it other than me. Anyway, that's fine. So what happened next? Okay, so 12 years later, here we are today. And DevOps is a bit different, or is it a bit the same? Let's talk about it. So let's get the noise and confusion out of the way. I said this was distracting, and it certainly is. So can you have a DevOps team, or can you have a job title of DevOps? So in 2012, Jez Humble wrote an article from the ThoughtWorks blog saying, can you have a DevOps team? And it went, well, is your team enabling A culture of collaboration. Is your DevOps team improving the speed and quality of release of your software? If not, it's not a DevOps team, is it? The same with job titles. If your job is not improving the company culture or improving the way you release or build software, then it's not really DevOps, is it? Unfortunately, that memo didn't really get through to everyone, and loads of companies just renamed their ops teams DevOps and called everyone a DevOps engineer. Because they just did, didn't they? And the main people moaning about this were people with the word DevOps in their job title, and I was definitely one of those. 12 years later, I think that's just kind of happened, and let's move on from it, because I think now the word DevOps and ops and infrastructure is kind of interchangeable. I think we've got more specific job titles now of like SRE and platform engineer, although I suspect they're being misused in the same way. But yeah, nods from the back, definitely there. Okay, so we lost that argument basically, and it's not worth the effort. Okay. And then the other one is, can you have a DevOps tool? Is your tool facilitating a company check? Thanks, Microsoft. You ruined that one, didn't you? So yeah, they took their version control pipeliney thing and called it Azure DevOps, and we were doomed at that point. So you can call anything you like at all DevOps, really, is the takeaway from this, and it's fine. Yeah. So there you go. Okay. But let's move on to some more positive stuff and stuff that actually made a difference. Okay. Number one, the State of DevOps report. So, first release 2013. So this report was produced every year. So we got one every year since then. And what it does is it kind of summarizes current trends in the industry and adoption of DevOps. So it might have some, early on it spoke about kind of infrastructure as code, and then there's some stuff on containers, and then team topologies, and then software bill of materials, and most recently AI. I'll come back to that in a minute. But the main point of the report, which was produced by the, let me look at my notes because I want to get this right. I want to get this right and not advance the slides too advanced, excuse me, is the DevOps Research and Assessment, or DORA as they're known. So that was an academic study group put together by Nicole Fosgren, Gene Kim, Jez Humble, that basically surveyed and analysed the adoption of DevOps in a load of organisations, and then did academic research on that to analyse the results and produce metrics on what the adoption of DevOps practices meant for businesses. So it was kind of justifying the DevOps and giving it credibility, because it was actually like proper analysis. It wasn't just somebody throwing out a Google form or something like that. It was like proper analysis. And that ran for every year, as I say, up until last year, where it's kind of pivoted now to AI. So it's not called State of DevOps Report anymore. It's called the State of AI-Assisted Software Development from an organization called DORA, which doesn't stand for anything now. Okay? Bear with. But again, it's an interesting read. It only mentions the word DevOps 8 times in the 40 pages, and 4 of those are in the introduction by Gene Kim. So it's really not talking about DevOps anymore, but it's still focusing on the DORA metrics. The academic research and the ways of analysing this stuff was actually written up in a book by the team that did the research. And if you're into like user research or systems research, fascinating book. If you're into your qualitative and quantitative metrics, all that stuff, it talks about how to build surveys, which are non-leading. Amazing book if you're into that stuff. So I'll just signpost that there if you want to do it. DORA metrics. Who's using DORA metrics? Yeah? Okay. How many are you measuring?
Only 4 of 5.
Damn you. There used to be 4. There's now an extra one they put in this year. So if you're only measuring 4, you've got some tickets to raise at work tomorrow. Basically, they removed mean time to recovery and put in failed deployment recovery time, which is kind of the same thing. But they introduced a new one called deployment rework rate, which I think is code for how many times your AI screwed up with a bad release. I think they're going to be tracking that over the next few years. Okay, that's DORA metrics. Okay, one of the main ways to communicate DevOps thinking is through the medium of dead trees. Okay, let's have a look at them. Okay, these are most of the ones I would recommend you read. Hands up who's read them all. There'll be someone, won't there? There he is at the back, yes. Okay. Has anybody read one of them or more? Anybody? Yeah, we got, okay. And you can win one tonight. Okay, so, yeah, so we'll start with this one. We'll start with the Phoenix Project. I'm going to give a little summary of each one. Obviously, I'd like you to read the book rather than just use this summary. So the Phoenix Project was from 2013. It's a textbook disguised as a novel, okay? So you read it and it's actually a story. It's kind of a rewrite of a book called The Goal by Elijah Goldratt, which was a series of constraint books from many years ago. But the Phoenix Project is about an automotive parts company that are trying to release their e-commerce site called the Phoenix Project. And spoiler, it's not going very well. Okay, and it's about what our hero, Bill, who's VP of Engineering, learns all the Devops things as they go through this journey. If you win the book, or you buy it, start reading it, don't read it on your summer holiday on a sunbed. Okay, it's really depressing. Okay, but everyone who I've told to read this and has then said, I read it, why didn't you tell me to read it sooner? And if you want to know what it's like inside operations, inside that fiery meme, this is a book about it. Okay. So what it covers is something called the 3 ways, which is a definition by Gene Kim, who's one of the main DevOps thought leaders, about how organizations can benefit from DevOps. And it kind of talks about kind of solving that problem from the sweary definition. It talks about the first way being just get DevOps talking, then get feedback between them, and then get them learning through amplifying feedback loops. And that's kind of a very potted version of what it is. There's a bit more to it than that. And then the next thing, and the big aha moment for me, was 4 types of work, because this resonated. So in operations teams, you've got 4 types of work. You've got business projects, you've got internal IT projects, and you've got changes. And then the 4th one is unplanned work. And unplanned work is the thing that strangles you, that smothers you, because it's unplanned. So what you need to do is when you are doing the first 3, it should have an impact on the unplanned work, or otherwise it's going to smother you. And I thought that was oh yeah, I get that, that makes sense moment. The other thing it talks about, which I probably shouldn't need to say at an Agile meetup, is visualizing work's a good idea. In the world of IT, we don't have raw materials, we don't have finished products, we don't have inventory, we don't have that. We have invisible work, we can't see it. And if you want to get really philosophical, none of it exists because it's just electrical charges on bits of sand. Well, that's another talk. But what it talks about is writing this stuff down on tickets, okay? Put it on tickets, stick it on a wall, you can see the work. Suddenly you understand how much work you've got to do, and obviously you can prioritize that, etc. So visualizing work was a main thing rather than just held in people's heads. You can win that book tonight and read all about it. Okay, book number 2, forward to 2019. This is called the Unicorn Project. Similar title, same authors. Well, same author. This is Gene Kim doing this one. This is a story about someone called Maxine, who's a software developer, who works at an automotive parts company and gets to work on something called the Phoenix Project. Sound familiar? Yeah, and it runs in parallel with the other book. But it's actually like the story of like just this developer on a new project and all the blockers they face in order to be able to actually do any chuffing work, which is quite stressful. So this talks about 5 ideals. Ones I think are valuable are focus, psychological safety, and customer focus as well. And again, you read the book, you can get into all the detail of that. But yeah, it runs in parallel with the other books, so it follows the same time frame. Okay, main thing from this is developer productivity matters. And I'll explain why that's important to myself in a bit. Then the SRE book. So this is 2016. So this is a collection of essays from Google on how you run infrastructure and services at scale. With the skill of software reliability engineering being you optimize the systems for your customers so that they have a good time using your stuff, okay? And you improve them. Lots and lots of things in this book. Things I particularly like is reducing toil, so automate manual repeatable work. And a way of focusing on service quality through service level indicators, service level objectives and service level agreements. Good way of like, is my stuff working and what happens? What guarantee can I give? And then error budgets, which is kind of like the reverse metric. If your team is developing as an error budget, every time something goes wrong, the error budgets decrease and eventually it runs out and they are made to work on fixes and improvements to the software and not release new features until that error budget is restored. Okay, interesting kind of like reverse way of looking at quality. I know many, many engineers who I hugely respect who have read this book. Some of them think it's absolute genius and brilliant. I would add, it's probably only really relevant if you happen to be running things at the scale of Google. You're probably not. And I know many, many respected engineers that got halfway through and threw it across the room in anger. So be wary of, you might not enjoy this as much as you think, okay. Next book, at last, the Devops Handbook got released in 2016. So Gene Kim, Jez Humble, Patrick Dubois, and John Willis. It's a reference guide. It's got a lot of case studies in there. It's basically covering the history of DevOps, not too dissimilar to what I covered tonight. But also it talks about 3 ways, which we saw in the Phoenix project, but with lots and lots and lots of illustrated examples and case studies and references. Some would say there are too many in there. And then it talks about DevSecOps, because when we started talking about DevOps, we were apparently meant to know that that included everything, including security. It wasn't just about Dev and Ops. So they wrote a chapter in the book saying it's about DBAs, it's about testers, it's about product owners, it's about architects, it's about like everything. It's not just Dev and Ops, but we approached it from there. Sorry, we should have been clearer. Okay, and then something local. Some people have written things that are actually in this book who are here tonight, not me. But this is Team Topologies, based off the early work of the Devops topologies, if anybody remembers that, from Matthew and Manuel, which basically this whole thing of can you have a DevOps team? Well, here's some diagrams of good versions of that and bad versions of that and how they interact. So I'm going to, I mean, has anybody here not read Team Topologies? Nobody's put, oh, there's a few people. All right, okay. Let me just say, like, read it. Like, just read it. Okay, I don't have to say more than that. It covers 4 team types. The main ones are streamlined teams, which are producing software and releases. And then there's platform teams, which are providing services to run that stuff. Interaction models, so self-service models, X of a service, or more collaborative ways of doing stuff. And a visual language, so we can understand how we can draw this and represent it. Super important, super useful. And then finally, it talks about cognitive load. Okay. And this for me was the, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense moment. So it's been around as a concept since I think the like 80s or something. Some research was done on understanding what makes people like burn out and overloaded with stuff. From a software perspective, first time it was mentioned was in the 12 Days of Christmas, 2015, article by Joe Pierce on this. And it talks about the different types of cognitive load. It talks about intrinsic cognitive load, so that's kind of like your domain knowledge, stuff you need to know to do your job. You've got to know that. It talks about extraneous cognitive load, which is kind of like stuff you need to know that, that is a bit of a distraction. It's stuff that you need to know to be able to do your job, but it's kind of like a bit of a side project. It's not your main focus. And then you've got Germain, which is kind of like the, where you're focusing on really understanding a problem and understanding how to actually get something done. So all these bits of your brain working in different ways have a limit to how much they can hold. And the book is talking about how we should design teams to be of a size that can hold this stuff in their heads. If they're required to like know loads of stuff, you know, it's not going to work because they just can't hold it in their heads. I was doing a talk at a similar time with Hannah Foxwell about shifting left. There was this whole thing about let's shift left the security, let's shift left the monitoring, let's shift left the capacity planning. And basically that was empowering development teams, and I say it in air quotes, to be responsible for things. They didn't ask to be responsible. It was kind of like this reverse over the wall mechanism. And my argument at the time was, if you are going to have a team that needs to look after something, you need to give them supporting documentation, tooling, and they need to actually understand how to do it, or otherwise you're just going to overload them. Too much cognitive load. Now, what Team Topologies also made the point of is having boundaries and responsibilities was a thing. If we think back to what we were seeing in the sweary definition, it was like everyone has to work together and understand what everybody does. And this was kind of like the anti-pattern. This is from Damon Edwards, who is one of the CAMS authors. And he said if you've got siloed teams, then the knowledge about the whole system is kind of like fragmented in a little bit. So the ops team know how it runs, and the dev might know a bit of it, but the ops team have no idea of the business objectives of the piece of software you're running. And that's bad because you can't make informed decisions. So what we should do is we should take cross-functional teams, take all those people and put them in multidisciplinary teams and allow them to have full context and understand and be aware because they're all working on the same stuff. Kind of in the you build it, you run it kind of way. Everybody's kind of working together. But you build it, you run it is from 2006, right? 20 years ago. Is that kind of like still relevant? Because there's a lot more Amazon things now than there was in 2006. And what I'm not saying is like things were simpler back then. There were a simpler time and an easier time. I think there's some truth in that. But of course, if you're working with a cloud provider in 2006, you had their basic resources they could provide: compute, storage, network. What you didn't have is maybe an off-the-shelf service to do the thing you had to make that do and write yourself. So although things are in some ways easier now, there's still more stuff to know. And our systems have become far, far more complex. We have that containerization and orchestration, etc. So this whole thing about holding everything in your head as a single team is getting a bit outdated. So what Team Topologies is saying, teams should only be built at the size that can hold or have responsibilities for the things they can hold in their heads. So we should have responsibilities and boundaries and partition stuff up. Because if we overload our developers with slide deck, excessive memory management, then they're going to crash and blue screen. Okay, so we need to be mindful about what our engineers can hold in their heads, which is where platform engineering comes in. So it's a relatively new book, and if we're talking about DevOps being a phrase which is misused, oh boy, are we in a world of misrepresented. So it was really good when this book got published because it kind of pulled all the definitions together and made sense rather than people going, I'm selling a platform, I'm selling a platform. So what platform engineering talks about is platform as a product, first of all. So we treat our platform as a product. Maybe have a product owner. We do product management type things. So we are focusing on the needs of the customers and not just the needs of the tech. It also talks about something called 4 pillars, which I think is a really good way of summarizing and explaining how we can run a platform team but still keep collaboration. So it talks about 4 pillars of product. So having a golden path, your product you provide needs to meet the needs of your users. So you'll have something like a golden path, which is the obvious, easiest way to use this product because it provides the majority of features which users are going to need. It talks about a development approach. So this thing is provisioned through self-service APIs or through libraries of code. We don't need to raise tickets and talk to people. This can be self-service. It talks about breadth. So this is kind of multi-tenancy. This product will fit a load of use cases, so we can have lots of users, but it's got guardrails and policies in place to make sure that it's isolated and safe. And then of a high operational level. So we're talking about a robust, maintained, monitored platform that's trusted by users, most importantly. And then it talks about having collaboration built into it with our customers and hiring for a team that's got that mindset and that aptitude. So we're not talking about the wall anymore. We're talking about teams working together and focusing on the customer. So what we're not talking about is reinventing that. What we're talking about is separating concerns with services and boundaries, but taking that wall away so that these pillars are providing that way of working together, and we've got a high level of collaboration between the two teams. Or in Team Topologies diagram, We've got a platform team, a service team that's providing X as a service with maybe an SRE function internally inside there. Okay, final book, bonus book, wasn't on the original list. This is brand new. Well, it's from Christmas time, or November time. So this is Frictionless. This is produced by, or written by Nicole Fosgren, Abby Noda. Abby Noda is formed a company called GetDX, talks about developer productivity, recently acquired by Atlassian. But the academic research and principles for the framework which they use have been published. So it talks about developer experience and developer productivity being important. So for a productive developer, they need to be in flow state. They need to be not interrupted. They need to be focusing on the problem. It talks about feedback loops. So our tests run quickly. We know if our stuff is broken. Our pipelines run quickly. If we're deploying it, we want to know if it's going to fail when it gets there quickly so they can get back to work. It also talks, again, about cognitive load. The cognitive load for a developer should be about doing their job and using the tools they've got and not worrying about the underlying platform implementation. All this is written up in a framework and research is published, links are available, and the evidence that comes back about productivity is pretty darn impressive in terms of the productivity gains you can get from having developers which are doing their job well. Okay, so that's Frictionless. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about fiction. So this was a marketing campaign by a platform company at one of the large cloud events that basically tried to do a little bit of a shock tactic by saying, DevOps is dead. Oh, no, it's not. It's actually platform engineering by our platform product. Unfortunately, the marketing campaign was so good with the logo that kind of stuck as a meme now. And I would say thank you very much to the company for doing that, for someone who runs a DevOps conference, because that's made things tricky. But it's a timely reminder that is it dead? Is DevOps dead? Is platform engineering the thing now? So what I've got on the screen here are 12 talk titles from 2 different DevOps days. One of them a long time ago, one of them quite recent. And I masked out the product names and stuff because that would kind of give away the age, whether they were new or old. But I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, there's a couple of ones I can guess has been from a bygone DevOps days because of the kind of things it talks about. But most of them, to me, I would struggle to tell which DevOps days they came from. So here's the spoiler. The top 6 were from the original DevOps days in Ghent in 2009. And the bottom 6 are from Zurich in 2025. So they're 16 years apart. And I think the talks 16 years ago and to date, we've still got the same problems. We've still got the same issues we're trying to solve. So is DevOps dead? Well, it's not for me. I don't think so. So is all that stuff we were talking about in 2014 still relevant? Is CAMS relevant? Is Lean relevant? Does it matter now we've got platform engineering? Well, if we look at this world and we think about where we moved from, so we come from this world to this world now, is CAMS relevant? So culture is baked in this product approach and the team's built around culture. We don't necessarily need to worry about the sweary loosest definition anymore. We've got that built in to how it does it. Automation. Well, we've got self-service infrastructure. I'd like to think automation is pretty much a given that we are doing it. I think where we need to be mindful, though, is that we are continually improving that and not getting complacent. Remember the lean thinking about continuous improvement. Are our pipelines fast enough? Are we producing a quality solution? If we start getting lots of fails on the builds and lots of errors in our system, that's a smell that we need to improve them. Okay. Measurement. We've never had so many metrics. Open telemetry, application performance monitoring. It's kind of there, isn't it? But so long as we're actually using them and acting on those metrics from a product ownership perspective, a product management perspective, because that's kind of built into product management as well, understanding the quality of your workloads and the performance. But again, we've got to make sure we keep doing it. And then sharing. My only concern with sharing is this might be a bit one way, in the sense that we've got a platform team which is obsessed with the customer requirements. That needs to come back the other way from the devs. And this isn't just a an ops problem, as we've seen from Star Dev, Star Ops. It's a system thing. So we need to be mindful about that sharing aspect still working there. And I think that covers all kind of most of the lean aspects as well as being relevant there. So for me, CAMS is still relevant, lean is still relevant, DevOps is still relevant. We've got one more thing to talk about, haven't we? We've got a business. It's producing software. That's our deliverable. When we create lots of software, we put load on the ops team. And we saw that in the early days of Agile, thanks. Lots of new releases, hopefully small batches though and safe releases. But we're in a world now where we're producing more software than ever with the rise of AI. So how is this going to affect this platform engineering paradigm we've got now? Particularly when the people producing code aren't people. Our customers are now agents, agentic teams. How does that collaboration work? We spent so long with our platforms focusing on the people aspect of making software, that what happens when they're not there? Well, of course, we've still got people writing prompts, so they're probably the obvious target for who we need to talk to. But we've got a lot of functionality we built into these platforms, which AI quite likes. So we've got golden paths, and we've got documentation around that we've given to the humans. AI likes that stuff. It might follow the rules, hopefully, if it doesn't hallucinate. We've got API self-service. Maybe the risk is that it spins up too many things and we have to make sure we don't blow our cloud bill or over-provision the services that it runs on underneath. It loves policies, AI, it loves rules. So this breadth aspect of policies and guidelines and guardrails, it loves that. And in terms of metrics and being operationally mature, it loves metrics, doesn't it? And how we integrate that into what the agents are doing and how they are alerted to problems and how they fix it, they could probably go and do that themselves. And last night, I was just running through this talk, and on my LinkedIn feed appeared an article by Matthew Skelton saying the same thing. He says, by designing our systems for humans, we're actually helping AI. And you can go read that article, it's when you get the slide deck. So that's like fresh off the press. I did message him on the LinkedIn post saying, I'm having that in my presentation, thank you. So there you go. So yeah, so I think we are setting up. What I don't have an answer for you though, about how this works, is what happens when we not only replace the developers with agents, but what happens when we replace the ops aspect of the platform team with agents? I haven't got an answer for that, but I'll work it out over the next 10 years, 12 years, and come back and tell you. That's me on LinkedIn. I don't do Twitter anymore. If you want the slide deck, there's a link. Thank you very much.